BCS just started and we have a bunch of results over the past weekend. We had BCS Sacramento, both standard and premium, as well as WGP in 2 other locations around the world. So lots of results to cover and just kind of some unexpected takes from some of these players. Obviously, Japan have their new implemented ban list, which is the Izazuo to 1 and Furai to 1. But it just seems like nothing has changed. So we're going to go through all the lists, most of the lists, and see what's kind of interesting and kind of see how the meta is developing on the Japanese side, and that will probably translate into the BCS season. So starting off, we have WGP Deluxe Season 3 in Indonesia. So the top 8 breakdown is 2 Shodoji and 1 of everything else. So Shurunui, Blangmaya, Leonor, Night Rose, Varga, Kairi. Kairi seems to be a deck that pops up every now and again, and I think it's pretty formidable now that the power level for Shodoji and Shurunui are dropping down, right? Then the top 4, so first and second were both Shodoji, third being Shurunui, and fourth being Varga, and this is after the ban list, so literally nothing has changed. Like, what changed, right? It feels like, you know, these 2 decks, especially Shurunui, got hit really badly with the Furai, but it seems like, you know, these results are still showing that in a singles tournament, it shows results. So let's go through some of the lists. So we have the first place list here. Obviously the Izazuo is to 1, but you always want to play it. But this particular player played the Cabbage. So essentially it's an early game, counterblast 1, call a token. And that's pretty much it, right? So how does this card kind of replace Izazuo is that it generates early game advantage, and that's kind of how Shodoji amps up the damage threshold to get your opponent to a point where, you know, your 7 attacks are pretty much unguardable, or like 2 card guard for each attack, and you're busting out like 7-8 attacks, and that's it, the game's over, right? So the role of this card is still the same as Izazuo previously, but I think Izazuo gave a bit more flexibility because not only did it provide you early game, it provides you with a way to access your pieces. Pretty much if you're like missing, you know, your Ujishi, then it gives you the access to that. If you're missing your Persona ride, you can search it off the top X or top 5 or whatever it was. Unprecedented, running at 3 copies, you know, you're still being able to find a lot of these stealth units. But the fact that now you're just replacing 3 Izazuo for 3 of the Cabbage, it's, you know, compensating for the early game, and not, I guess, losing out in the early game. You lose one or the other, right? So I think the early game is much more impactful for this deck to, I guess, run towards its win con. So yeah, very cool list. We do have the second place doji as well. This one runs the grade 2 back from DBT 13. Essentially, it's like 2 or less rearguards gain plus 10. So it's a 20k stealth attacker. And if it hits the Vanguard, then you can retire and draw 1. So slight applications, but I feel that the Cabbage definitely does more. Not to say that it doesn't do much. It actually does a lot. And to be honest, there could be like another build or another idea to run the Dark States Dragon Empire one, especially if you're, you know, spamming your Ojishis, putting stuff into Soul, and then you'll be able to churn out like early game stuff, right? So lots of applications and lots of different ideas playing for Shujudoji, and I think it's still going to be, you know, one of the more prevalent decks in the format, even with the hit. But, you know, obviously you hit the consistency by a bit, and I think this deck is like omega consistent. It just does what it does, it gets to where it wants to be, and that's just it, right? Looking at Shurunui also didn't really leave the landscape. The only thing that really changes is that you lose 3 multi-attackers that had power, and I think that's really important, right? But if you think about it, it actually doesn't really change the fact that the attacks are still annoying, right? Because if you're running Seikai, right, it still runs like Furai. It's a 15k attacker because it's 10 plus the 5 on the crest. So it's a 15k attacker. If you're playing Esperadia, then it is an 18k attacker. You boost with it, it's 23, trigger 33. So the multi-attack doesn't change, it's just the power scaling on the cards that get called on the first stride when you multi-attack. That is what is essentially limited in this deck, right? You know, hitting 25 early for 15k shield, then going into 33, 43 makes that early stages of the strides are much more impactful, but now that it's gone away, if you hit a defensive trigger, then you're pretty good, right? Against decks like Empoleon, if it gets like higher base power, then it, I guess, limits the power output from this deck. So you can start to play that sort of way with Shunui now. But alas, the longer the game goes, Shunui gets better, power scaling gets better, multi-attack gets better. 7-attack deck is always good, right? So Shunui, nothing has really changed other than the fact that you replace 3 Furai with like EV cyclers. If you're not already playing max forward revertus, then you put that in 2. But otherwise the build hasn't really changed at all, right? Then jumping to the Chiho Cup Deluxe in Okinawa. So lots of changes here. We actually don't see a lot of Shoujo Doji. We actually see a lot of Night Rose, and there was only 1 block. So 9 Night Rose being the majority of the pie chart. Then going to Vanguard, Harry, and Shoujo Doji being the 3 higher tier, well, higher proportionable decks in this top cut, and then pretty much a bunch of everything else, right? It's good to see Harry, I guess, shine in the second portion of the pie chart. That's definitely something I want to see, and I think Japan in its entirety is just flagging Night Rose as much better than weakened Shoujo Doji and weakened Shunui, right? But then the top 4, right? It's a bit odd, right? So the first team brought Night Rose, Wellstra, and Chaos. Chaos being this one deck that, again, like Kairi, pops up every now and again. Second team brought Varga, Tegria, and Night Rose. Third brought Undercover, Direful Dolls, and Eva. This team definitely got in by diversity cut. And then the 4th place team brought Shunui, Night Rose, and Harry. So lots of wild stuff going on. So let's see the first one. It's Tegria. That is probably one of the most jaw-dropping ones. Like, how the hell did this get here? Everything in this list is available in English, so your Biscottis, your Mayrigs, PRs, focusing on the Persona Ride order, your new Tegria that essentially double Persona Rides, and you pretty much have like 4 attack per turn, right? Very simple deck, very straightforward. Sogaon's busted, makes the deck really good, able to churn through essentially and get whatever you want, right? So that's Tegria. Then we have Undercover. I have actually no idea how this deck plays. I just know that this grade 2 searches for like an Undercover card or a Shadow Paladin. And then you have your Obscurate. So very cool deck. It's very maxed. I think 4 secrets, a bunch of like FRs, FFRs, like even the Obscurate, but the Obscurate is SR, right? So yeah, very, very shiny deck. Super cool. I really want to see this deck more in action. I haven't actually played with this deck, so I'll probably hit up some of my local guys to someone to bring this deck out. It looks pretty cool. Then we have Direful Dolls, utilizing the new PR. I think the new PR is really strong into Direful Dolls. Direful Dolls really needed something that amps the power, and this card essentially provides that. It was kind of something Direful Doll needed. The deck was already tanky, it just needed a bit more offense, and this is the card that provides it, right? Otherwise, everything else just kind of stays the same. Pretty interesting to run the grade 3 countercharge order. I don't know if you actually need the counterblast, but then again, I guess like your new PR does use CB, so maybe you do need it. I'm unsure. Haven't really tested this deck much. Kind of put it on the back burner since set 1, just because of like time rules, BSF, and all that stuff. So would be pretty cool for me to get back and invest some time into this deck. Looks pretty cool. Then we also have Shunui, just kind of seeing how this Shunui took on the take for the 3 restricted Furais. So this player brought 2 of the EB cycler that returns a card from drop to hand when you discard it, and then maxing out on EB cyclers. Pretty straightforward. I was on the weekend and I played Michu, an unfinished Michu, and all the cards that I didn't have, I just replaced it with cyclers and it worked well. So I think the idea is the same here. You're missing 3 of your most crucial cards, just replace it with cyclers and away you go. Yep. So that's that. And then looking at the Harry deck, this one is quite wild. Playing 3 Vade Rock and 3 of the new Shenri clone for Dark States. Proccing if you have less rear guards than your opponent, or no, sorry, one or less rear guards, or if you played an order, and then the order that they play is the prison cage, being able to soul charge one caller card out from soul and +5. Quite odd, because I feel that the Shenri clone and its synergy with the order, you kind of need both of them at the same time. But then again, you know, now you can start dropping this early, having a little bit more early game, which is good, and, you know, pushing the pressure on your opponent to get to a higher damage threshold so that your strides will, you know, churn away at them. So yeah, very interesting build. Probably will test this out. It seems like a pretty cool concept. I think a lot of Japanese decks are running the Shout Applause and the Togue engine, but this deck doesn't run the Togue engine, and it does run the Walk the Dark. So wondering how this particular player gets that grade 3 into Soul consistently to be able to EB3 to maximize on that grade 3, right? But otherwise, very odd to see low Gungarum counts, but still, you know, high on the Tizcars, and I think I like that. Tizcar is really good in this deck, but yeah, the hand doesn't really show much. I guess the Shenris kind of compensate for that, and then the Shadow Paws puts it back, and yeah, away you go. So yeah, very interesting take on Harry, another different build of Harry, which is cool. Then we have BCS Sacramento. This is probably the most interesting bit. So obviously this is the first event of the BCS season, and this is pretty much the starting point and I guess the benchmark, I guess, that players are setting for pretty much the rest of the world, and kind of seeing what the standard format is at the moment. And as you can see, a quarter of the players in the top 32 breakdown brought Shoujo Doji, so 8 Doji, 6 Leonorn. I think Leonorn is a very strong deck in this current metagame. And it only gets better with the set 4 support, because it gets a grade 2 that essentially acts as a Luster Purge, or whatever the dragon is, that boosts. And it's essentially an unconditional draw 1, which is, well, an unconditional +1, which is really strong. And then pretty much a bunch of everything else. I'm actually pretty surprised not to see more Vargas. But yeah, you know, Varga seems to be a deck that a lot of people take. But I feel like in an environment where you have high round counts, the consistency of Varga and the nature of the deck, if you're playing it against really good players, they know how to deny you, and yeah, Varga just will not cut it for BCS, right? Until you know, Rakshasa comes out. I think that card is insane. But yeah, anyhow. Moving on to the top 16, so 5 Doji out of the 8 made it, and then 2 Zorga, Leonorns. Actually, a bunch of the Leonorns just died, right? 1 Michu, which is pretty cool. Wallstra, Varga, Eva, Lascaria, Prison, Shunui. And then going into the top 8, half of them were Shoujo Doji, which is, to be honest, not really surprising. I think Doji that is completely unrestricted at the moment, I think the deck is pretty bonkers, and then one of everything else. So Leonorn, Zorga, Michu, Wallstra. Then the winners, so the winner brought Shoujo Doji, so Kenny Wong, congratulations, taking up first place with Shoujo Doji. Then second place was Ken Cheong with Zorga, really cool to see Zorga there too. Alec Goff, so Utman, coming third place with Doji, and then Landa just missing out on that World's Invite with Leonorn. So pretty straightforward. Unrestricted Doji just means that you play 4 Zasuo, and everything else just kind of stays the same, which is, I guess, the same as Utman's deck. Maxing on pretty much everything, maximum consistency, no fluff. Twin cast instead of Union the Sky, because that comes at the end of November. Pretty straightforward deck. And then we have the Leonorn. Leonorn is probably, you know, one of the most outcasted decks, or not a lot of people are, I guess, expecting for it to do well. And this event really showed why it can do well, right? This deck gets better with set 4 support, as I said, with the new grade 2, but otherwise pretty much the rest of the engine is there. A lot of these cards you will still play: Rosarium Fairy, Luster Purge, Alvira, the EB Cycler, Vivace of course, but you might not need to run like the Habitat or the grade 3 order here. You can kind of replace them for the new grade 2, as well as this grade 1 promo as well. So slight changes will just buff the deck. The deck is already really strong, especially against stride decks. This deck is very, very, very good. So yeah, that is Leonon. Then jumping to premium, this is where all the spice happens, I gotta say. There's a few weird ones on this pie chart. Maybe like in a later video, if I do get the deck logs, I'll probably cover it. But a lot of the players, actually a quarter of the players brought Shiranui, where 3 players of each brought Neonectar and Grand Blue respectively. 2 Bermudas, 2 Mega Colonies, and then 1 Angel Feather, 1 Narukami. So the 3 Grand Blue, one of them was a Night Rose Vivace. So how I understand it is that you ride into Leonon and then Bad Bounty into a Vivace for what, 3 or 4 more attacks, which is, yeah, quite interesting. And then Angel Gizeh there as well, which is very surprising because Angel Gizeh has a really bad matchup into Shiranui. And for it to get this far is pretty cool, right? But I guess then, you know, a lot of decks that get into the top 16 are X2 players. So, you know, if you just bubble out of the cut, then you obviously include it in the top 16 cut. So you'll see a few rogue decks here and there as well. But for the most part, I think a lot of the decks that we see in this graphic are expected, yeah? Then the top 8 were 2 Highlanders, 2 Grand Blues, where one of them is that Night Rose Vivace, 1 Katrina, 1 Gridora, 1 Nubatama, and the Angel Gizeh. That's pretty wild to me. Then the people who made it to Worlds, so congratulations, Zachary Williamson, coming first place with Katrina. Probably the best deck in the format. Only bad matchup is Gridora. But yeah, like if you're playing against a field of Shiranuis, where Shiranui is, you know, very accessible, Gridora just has a really bad time, right? Second place was Jun Kim playing Shiranui. Third was Hui Trin playing Reindeer, so Highlander. And then fourth, just missing out on World's Invite, Peter Van Allen with Gridora. So his fan favorite, well, you know, his favorite deck essentially. So just looking at the decks, Shiranui. So this Shiranui that came second, I think. This one's wild. This one plays 2 Crest Makers, which is baffling to me, and playing 4 of the Ride Fixers. So essentially 6 potential targets for the Crest Maker, and apparently that this particular player only missed twice, which is pretty crazy. So like 7 rounds, top 16 cut is 4, so it's 11. So 9 out of 11 rounds hitting the crest while running it only at 2 is wild, right? Pretty much everything else is kind of as you expect a Nobutamma list. You know, you're playing the Doji grade 2 for early game. You have Mizukaze, one of the most broken cards in premium. Actually pretty unfair cards in premium, to be honest. And then pretty much making space for the discard grade 1. Owen's good because you're able to search out the Forbital Surrogate. Yeah, pretty much everything in the package, right? So very, very strong deck. Probably we'll see more of this in the future as well. We don't have obviously the Katrina list, but I'm pretty sure it's very straightforward. You know, Maiden Stampioni, Asha, pretty much the likes of the deck that I played for BSF Sydney, right? Highlander, this is actually pretty interesting. I actually wanted to cover a little bit more on this deck. So Highlander went through a bunch of like new lyrical support, and this grade 2 came up. I think this grade 2 is like $35 or something. Essentially on place rearguard, soul charge 1, and then you can combos 1 and draw a card, right? Spammable, very good, and essentially when it attacks a grade 3 or greater, if you have the same card name in soul, then it gains +5, right? So if you somehow get, you know, a grade 3 reindeer into soul somehow, when you're rewriting, for example, on like Hill Trotter, this card gets power. Pretty cool. But the first card, well, the first effect, sorry, is spammable, and that's pretty much the main reason why you play this card. And then you also play this grade 2, so you're now replacing the Justine. The Justine used to be a 6k booster that allowed you to ride down. So this Presto card, essentially when it's discarded during your turn, if you have a grade 2 or greater Vanguard, you can soul blast 1, call it to rear, and then if it's during your battle phase, it can't attack, but it can boost, right? So the second skill is if your rearguard was returned to hand this turn, then it gets boost. So if you use your Aquas, you use your Yuikas, the effect procs off, right? And the main bit is the Soul Blast 1. So if you're going first and you want to deny your opponent first stride, you can ride Reindeer. Reindeer skill ride something else, Soul Blast the Reindeer, and then ride down, right? So yeah, Prestro, very cool card. And then you're also playing the generic grade 2. Essentially, it is, I guess, a Highlander-ish card. The second effect is where it's really shines. So when this unit attacks, choose any number of units. And if you chose 3 or more, and all of them are different name, which in a Highlander deck it is, this unit gains plus 5k. And if you chose 4 or more, then all the chosen units, well, if all the chosen units are different name, then at the end of battle, you can choose one of your rear guys and bounce it. It's really important because Helltrotter discards 3. So now if you're committing this, right, you can have better power lines, but then this card bounces a card, which essentially allows you to discard, right, if you only have 2 cards in hand. So yeah. Pretty cool inclusion. I don't think there's anything else that is very different. Playing one of the mist off to reduce the hand, and playing one of the grade 1 that essentially bounces. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, this deck does play Justine as well. So a lot of Soul Blasting to be able to ride down. So I guess this player really wants to opt to go first. Yeah. Very cool. Very interesting deck. And then the last deck we have is Gridora. So this deck, I've said it multiple times, it comes in waves. It gets really good one regional, and it gets really bad one regional, and it goes up and down based on the metagame. But I think in this current format, it is really hard for Gridora to play, especially if the likes of Highlanders around, if like Shu Nui's around. It's really hard, right? Sure, you know, you lock your opponent from riding and they can't ride Oboro, but they have mechanisms to be able to get those Oboros back if the player is good, right? Or builds the deck correctly with Gridora in mind. So, I don't know. I don't know about Gridora. I think it's still a really unfun deck, but you know, if you're playing into a very superior heavy metagame, then it's really good, right? And we can't really discount that because, you know, there's a lot of mechanisms that you can, a lot of engines that you can kind of pop into Gridora and it just works. Like this engine playing just 3 mist off instead of Mahonolys. There's a lot of flexibility there, right? Because a lot of your slots are varying. So you're playing, you know, your Dual Nation card as well. There's a lot of things that you can kind of fit in this deck just to make it work. I think in BSF we also saw a mill version of this deck. So yeah, there's just a lot going on. And I think, you know, it really gets carried by this floodgate of a card, right? Darkface Gridora, grade 4 stride, really unfair card. And it's not just like superior ride deck, it pretty much cancels out like most decks in the format. And yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a deck that will hang around because it keeps those other decks in check, and you kind of need that, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all the results for this past weekend. BCS Sacramento was really cool. I saw a lot of the pictures from it. It looked amazing, really hyped. Can't wait for, I guess, my regionals to start, but that I think starts November, I think. So yeah, lots of things coming up, and I think there's a few regionals before November, so can't wait to cover the results, I guess. And if you guys have any lists, submit it to Fuzzy Paradox. Link in the description to his Twitter and the VG Paradox site. There is also like a banner on his website that says, you know, press for submission. So if you guys want to submit your list, if you hit the top cut, feel free to do so. We'll, you know, help fuel the results for this season. So yeah. And that's pretty much it. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of all the results this weekend. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.